The San Diego Code School is a proud sponsor of the Sorry for Helping podcast. The San Diego Code School is leading companies to tech equity. The Tech-Enabled Apprenticeship Program is a venture whose heart is to do a lot of social good and do good work. You can help San Diego Code School secure funding for change by hiring developers, bringing a team in to relieve your backlog, or becoming a program sponsor. You can visit us on the web for more information at http://sdcs.io.
GoldenSquirrel.io is a proud sponsor of SorryForHelping.com. We're flipping the job search and hiring market on its head by having companies apply directly to you. You communicate what you'd like to be working on or what tools you'd like to be working with, as well as your desired salary. We'll keep it all anonymous till the employer reaches out for a conversation. If you'd like to be a little more proactive, you can search companies with benefits, tools, and the environment you're looking for in your next role. It's time to fix hiring. GoldenSquirrel.io.
Everybody out here is doing pretty well. Weather's nice, so living the dream, man. Just living the dream.
All right. Well, why don't we start by giving a little bit of what we've worked on before, even though me and you have heard this spiel from each other like 700 times, just to give some background of going into this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to start, or you want me to start?
Nah, you can start.
All right. So I met Jeff Winkler at a San Diego JavaScript meetup, and he seemed like this rando dude, just like bunch of questions, and I could tell he had put some thought into this process of like, hey, I want to start a code school, but I had just come off of. Well, not just come off it, but I had run a little like training program with a couple other senior folks. We called it Starters Academy. So that was with me, a guy by the name of Trey Hunter, who's a super awesome Python developer, and Todd Basher. He was a ServiceNow developer, and all of us were seniors and we're like, hey, we just want to help people out. So we started this little, in the evening, we're going to take some mid-level engineers and try and get them leveled up and get them to senior. So like, that's what we identified as like what we were interested in doing. And so we did one cohort. We didn't really have a business plan going into it. We're just like, let's help some folks. So that's always solid when you just like dive in without any plan. And we're just,
it's the only way I know how to do it.
Yeah. And we were excited, but we didn't really get the target audience we were looking for. We couldn't find that many mid-level engineers. And so what we ended up with was like super beginner folks. And so the experience of coaching people that were super new when we were expecting like mid to senior was brutal. And so we were all like, all right, the end of the first cohort, what do you guys want to do? You guys want to do another cohort? And we're all like, nah, I'm good. Like that was a nice little like experiment, but this is not something I want to do full time. And we all just kind of like kept doing our day jobs. This was before the term side hustle was really a thing, right? This was like pre-side hustle. And so when Jeff walks up to me at the meetup and he's like, hey, I want to start code school. I'm like, no, I don't think you want to do that. And like, he was asking me questions about how many people were going to sign up. And just like all of this was like flashbacks to like the failed experiment we had. And so I was just like, all right, this dude seems like super excited and passionate about helping people and like super focused on getting people jobs. And you told a compelling story about like going through a code school yourself and knowing you could do better. So I'm like, all right, like he's super motivated. I'll just give him a couple like points of like, hey, like I think it's going to take you a little bit longer than you might think to get started with your first cohort. It's going to be really tough, but like if you want to do it, like good luck, buddy. And like I won nothing.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying it was you were like, oh, when are you gonna have your first class? And I was like 60 to 90 days. And you were like, no, you're not.
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, no, I was not buying it. But like I could tell you're excited. So I didn't want to like completely rain on your, because I tend to do that. I tend to be like, I'm a software engineer, so I'm just like, nope, wrong, not going to work that way. So I have to like pull back and realize that like not in that environment. I got to be kind of like delicate so people don't get like hurt feelings. Like, bro, I talked to this mean dude at the meetup and he was like terrible. So So I was just like, oh yeah, I think it's going to take you a little bit longer. So you might want to factor that in. There's going to be some challenges. Here's what I think you're going to run into. And I just remember after that conversation being like, oh my God, like bless his heart, this is going to be brutal. And then sort of like stepping back and like going back to what I was doing day to day. And then I think the next time we chatted and I like took a serious look at what you were doing was when I got invited to speak at one of the first, like inviting someone like a professional to come talk to the class.
Yeah, no, I definitely remember that.
So I remember walking in there and I just remember looking around the room. This was like in a conference room, right? So I'm like, dude is running a code school in a conference room. Like this is legit. Like this is no game. Like he's going to make stuff happen. And then I was like, okay, I have no doubt he's going to work out anything that needs to like happen for him to be successful. Cause I'm like, dude is doing it. Like he's in a conference room with like a full conference room of students that are just like excited, like on the edge of their chairs, ready to hear me talk about day in the life of a software engineer. So I'm just
in your bright orange shirt.
My bright orange shirt. This was like super fat Mike Roberts. This is like Mike Roberts with like no shirt tucked in, just like, hey bro, like coding is great. Talking about dogs in the office and all that good stuff.
I have a picture of it. I have a picture of it somewhere. Actually, I probably have a. I bet I have a video of it somewhere. Actually.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. It's terrible. It's like the lighting's all off, and it's just like I'm in this like spotlight with the hard shadow behind me. I look like I'm outside of a prison, and the spotlight hit me, and I'm just like,
yeah.
So I just remember thinking from that experience, I was like, it was exciting. I had invited students from other code schools to come visit Zito and walk around, take a tour, and like I was always pumped about like talking to students, talking about people at the early part of their career. And so I just remember being very humbled by that experience and thinking, this guy is like gonna make it happen. Like there's no doubt he's gonna make it work. And then the thing that got me to like join, and I don't know if this was like super planned out and this was part of your secret mission to like try and get me interested, but I remember I got invited.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now that you know me, I don't know if it was planned out or not either. I can't remember.
I just remember showing up to the demo day, and it was probably a different class. Like this was a while later, and it was at a time where I was just I was a little frustrated with where I was at career-wise, and walked in, and it was just like people were talking about their life story and how it's changed now, and they got a job and they built this project. And I was just like, literally like, I'm not crying, you're crying. Like, I'm not crying, right? And like, just hit me hard. I was just like, this is like deep. Like these people are making a significant shift in their lifestyle, and like things will be totally different, right?
Right.
And so I remember leaving and I was just like, I guess I'm going to go work for code school because like not working here is kind of dumb. So then, we had the back and forth conversations and stuff. And next thing you know, everybody's like, Mike Roberts is working at Origin? What? Like, that's insane. And I'm like, wow, this makes all the sense in the world to me. So
in hindsight,
that's how I got there.
In hindsight, it kind of reminds me of when we were running the job fairs, where it was just the day that you were like the most proud of what we were doing. So it seemed like the most natural to probably invite you there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was far more strategic than you're giving yourself credit for at the moment. But
probably, I'm sure I was scheming it, but
yeah. But I mean, it makes an impact when you're working there to be part of those days, like demo days and graduation ceremonies, career fairs. Like those are the times where you're just like, there's nothing. The only day that's better than that, and it usually happens like over Slack. When someone like today, we had somebody that was like been struggling for a while. He's like, oh yeah, I got an offer starting on Monday. And I'm just like, yes, that makes it all worthwhile.
I know. No better feeling in the world than that.
No better. And then they're just like, yeah, I got a job starting on Monday. Thanks guys. And you're like, whoa. Details, man. Like you gotta like, give me the rest, fill in the gaps. Like I need to know everything, man. Like savor this moment, right?
It's like a child leaving high school saying they go to college and you want 600 details. They're just out.
Yeah. So that happened. Somebody got a job today, which was pretty awesome, pretty legit. Got a nice offer. I think it's the all-time high for us. So I don't know if we can say numbers. Can we say numbers?
Let's not say numbers, but let's say where it's at. Are
Yeah,
you
no
allowed
one's
to
gonna
say
know where
that?
it's at. Yeah, but no one's gonna know where that's at. It's like it's
Oh, okay.
it's like an agency. So
Okay. Well, I
yeah.
feel like you could say the company name or the number, but probably not both.
Oh yeah, I'll give you the number because the number I think is pretty good.
All
It's
right.
our all-time high. I think it's our all. Actually, no, take it back. It's not our all-time high. Our all-time high is significantly higher, but this is a really good offer. So this is someone that had some prior experience and been coding before, been out of the game for a while, and came back to refresh his skills. So we got him in at $150. So $150 is good, right? So
Dude,
like that's nothing to sneeze at.
that's absurd.
Our all-time high, I guess I can give that number too because it's like nondescript and whatnot, is over 200 total compensation.
Was it data science?
No, was not data science.
What?
It was a unique skill set that this individual had.
Can you
And
give more
experience.
can you give more context to the 150 in the sense of like roughly how many years they had when you say they jumped back in? Was it like they like
Yeah,
just
excess of a decade. So we're talking about like a
okay. Okay.
senior engineer, but a senior engineer that hasn't been working for like 10 years. So we're talking about like 10-year-old technology.
Sure.
So
Makes me feel
like
a little bit better mentally.
yeah, this isn't like a brand new person that's like that happens, but that's like, that's super rare. That's not usually up in that
It was still dude, it's still hilarious to me that the first student at Origin was Jeff Ward and is
Oh yeah.
110.
Oh yeah.
Just be like,
It's just
what?
it's just a super freak thing that happens. And
Seriously.
I think it's a combination of like the effort and like being somewhat selective about the people that you have in your first cohort, right? Because that's when you have the most energy and you're like, I'm going to get this person. And everyone has like all these like big high hopes, big eyes. You haven't become disillusioned yet. And so you don't have that like blood in the water smell that happens like
Right.
after you've been doing it for a couple of years and people are like, bro, that's ridiculous. I'd never like
Plus,
start something like that.
plus, I feel like the highest offer that goes to code school students is usually the first offer to the first code school student. I feel like once they've got to like 4 to 6 code school students, the offer is a little more reasonable, we'll say, and the
Yeah, styled
expectations
in.
of and the expectations because they've kind of like built processes around it and kind of invested in that as well. Because you can get, I feel like any one-off that I'm not even sure that they knew that he went to code school when he got 110, right? There's just like a random one-off.
Yeah.
But anyways.
But it takes that combination of like of luck and skill, right, to survive in the game. So
Oh yeah, I mean he was in LinkedIn groups starting like recruiter channels and having recruiters come into his channel just so he could get more people looking for a job for him. And that's actually how he found it. Was he was in a recruiter LinkedIn channel or group or however those things work, and just said, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Does anybody have any jobs in Southern California?" And then it turns out the recruiter that ended up getting him his job was actually in that LinkedIn group.
It's insane. Okay, so when I came in at Origin, we were in the super experimental, like, hey, why don't you try this night class thing? And I was just like, all right, dope. That sounds kind of interesting. So we worked on that and we made an experiment and we got useful information out of it. We learned a ton, primarily that it doesn't work. Like part-time night class is terrible. It was a good experiment. And I think, given the right circumstances and nurturing, I think it could, there's a potential to make it work. I'm sure there are programs out there that make it work. But we always treated it kind of like it was good, but it wasn't the same as the day class. And so it was just hard to make them a comparable product, right? So I would say it was always something where we were just like, just not positioned well to do something that was that different than the daytime class. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, and I think we can dive into details of that more in the future when we talk about the experiments that we took and learnings. But
Yeah.
One of the interesting things to me was everybody asked for the night class, right? But
Yep.
then 50% of the people that were like, oh, I'd definitely take a night class would come back and be like, nope, I just want the day full-time class. So it's kind of one of those instances where people ask for something that they think they want, and then you give it to them, and then they actually didn't want that. That's kind of how I perceived it.
So it was really interesting to me to come into an environment where I felt like there were some high expectations to come in and like make make things happen, right? And so I felt initially like, let's get 100% invested in a night class thing. And then I very quickly realized like, oh man, this is like super weird. Like, I don't know if this is
Were
going
we
to
talking to
work.
you about an online class at this point, or did we not talk about that until the night class thing was over?
I mean, I know we've done a lot of thinking about the online thing, but I don't remember us making a decision about like I don't think we were ever at the point where we were ready to green light that. I think after the night class, my focus was on, okay, how do we solve a couple of the other challenges and get ourselves positioned to be able to solve the enrollment issue where like at the time everyone had enrollment dates that were like super spread out, and like you could acquire somebody and then lose them because another school had an enrollment date a little closer, and so they would just go with like the closest date
That's
instead
right.
of waiting
That's
like
that's
45
kind
days.
of that's kind of what we used online to solve. That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it was online. I think we were trying to figure out how to solve that problem. And then what we landed on was like start now, right? And then starting to figure out how to make the mechanics on that work.
Right.
So that basically meant we had to rewrite. Well, at the same time, we had to make a decision about whether we were going to stay with C# and Angular or whether we were going to pivot to full stack JavaScript. So I just remember we made a lot of changes like bang, 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 right? Like we started the night class and then we sort of shifted directions and like changed some of the scheduling around. We consolidated the classrooms. We started the start now. We were doing a lot of experiments. We were doing a lot of multivariate testing all together.
Yeah. We did a lot. We did a lot of things. And then
Yeah.
remember, it was like, all right, teach for half the day, code for half the day.
Yep. You know, we were trying to solve a lot of those issues that were like, and it was good because like we experimented on everything that we saw was like super broken at every other program. And like the things that you learned from where you went, the things that I saw when I, got a chance to talk to the other code schools in town and like what I tried beforehand. So it's like, we took everything that we had learned up to that point and we're working on actively solving each of those problems. And meanwhile, the students were just like completely oblivious to the fact that like we're doing all of this work to try and solve all these problems that they're not even aware that like are on the radar. So that's the part that I look back and I'm just like, they just have no clue, like none, just how
No.
hard that everybody was working to try and like
It
solve all
was
these problems for them.
it was helpful that we had the curriculum that Cameron had written that we could fall back on.
Yep.
So that way that we knew that at least they were going through that curriculum and we could help them when they got stuck. And I think one thing that in hindsight is kind of crazy to me is how much every member of the team learned because we were all part of various experiments at the same time. And we were very resource constrained. In fact, we never got any resources other than what we generated ourselves through sales. And so because of that, we all knew exactly how all of the experiments were going in real time and kind of learned how a lot of those played out. It wasn't like, oh, I wonder how Mike's doing on experiment A. It was like, I'm very intimately involved in all of the experiments, as are you, and as was Anthony and Christian and Cameron.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy that like so many things were happening at once. And I just remember like not being super certain, but kind of feeling like, okay, we need to move to a full stack curriculum. And that's a big shift, right? There was a little bit of pushback from folks on the team that were just like, nah, like I really want to teach C#. And so, we kind of changed some things up there. And I remember I didn't feel that sense of like validation until our boy Kyle Simpson was out walking around with him. And I was like, Kyle, what do you think about like full stack JavaScript as a curriculum over like focusing on the market technology like C# Angular or like Ruby on Rails in a Ruby on Rails town? And he was just like, nah, bro, like full stack all the way. Like every school, like that's the direction everybody needs to go in, full stack, just like make it super streamlined. But obviously like he's the JavaScript guy. So like I'm asking the wrong person.
Yeah. Yeah, but in fairness, he'd like written curriculum for like 2 code schools when you asked him. So he at least had like hands-on experience, like a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, you could always argue it's a somewhat biased position based on like his preferred like language, right? But it gave me a big boost of confidence. It was like, yeah, man, like Kyle says it's good. I thought it was good. The students are liking it. Like everything just kind of like made sense. And that's when I was just like, okay, we got this. Like we're going to be good. Now we just need to work on some of the other problems, the other mechanics. It's helpful that React kind of took off because we were before the curve. Like we went all in on React way before it was obvious that React was going to take off here in San Diego.
And actually, to your credit, I remember before we even started React, it was a year before that when you weren't even at Origin yet that you were like, dude, React's going to take over.
Yeah. And I mean, having some experience and understanding fundamentally the differences between like Angular being focused on like these big patterns that are easier to implement in large organizations and React being very like just functional JavaScript. It's just a little library on top, makes a lot of logical sense to an engineer, but you still don't know where the community is going to end up, right? So you're just like taking a gamble. And it just so happens that like React became like jQuery, where it was just like everybody's using it, like better learn React because like sure Vue came up and Vue's still a thing, but like it's not different enough to say, you know, because people ask that question all the time, like, well, why don't you teach Vue or why don't you use this? Like, come on, bro. Like, I don't have this conversation again about why we don't teach Python again. Like,
yeah, Python had a really good run in the code school world.
Well, I think it's still very buzzy and it still like has a good place for like data science and all that automation. But I feel like you are kidding yourself if you're not thinking like for a short immersive program that you should focus on fewer languages and getting more done with like teaching the person less languages and tools, right? So in any way, shape, or form, if you try and justify anything else, I feel like it's just a losing argument.
Yeah, and in hindsight, because I didn't add very much value to the discussion back when that was going on, right? I just kind of relied on you and Cameron to like hash it out.
Yeah.
And so Cameron ended up agreeing with you, and so we went with it. But in hindsight, it's a no-brainer, right? Like for several different reasons, but the main reason just being even in real time, like being able to like right now, I've had to learn JavaScript, Angular, Java, SQL, right, and very limited amount of AWS. And so if you could just keep the syntax to a minimum on the JavaScript, that would save me so much like mental inventory of just like having to manipulate arrays and objects in two different languages, you know, back to back. So it would just save so much. So now I understand more when students would say it takes me 2 weeks, because the only feedback I had was the students in the one-on-ones, and they used to just be like, it took me 2 weeks to even figure out what C# was or how it was different or do the context shift. So yeah, in hindsight, I could have just agreed with you in 3 seconds, but you know, we got to play that out for a little bit.
But to be fair, I wouldn't have agreed with me either. Like I would, if I was on the other side, I'd just be like, well, I don't know. I feel like we're just guessing at this point, but like, I'll take the guess.
I mean,
right?
the disadvantage you had was that we already had curriculum in Angular and C#.
Oh yeah.
And so it was so easy to not change. So that was the thing they had against you at the time.
Kind of, sort of, because remember, this was just when Angular was going from like Angular 1 to like 2.
Yeah.
And like they didn't have I don't even know if they went to 3 or if they skipped and went to 4. I can't keep track of Angular. They're going too fast. So we had to build some new Angular curriculum, and that's when I was like, Cameron, come on, bro, we're gonna have to teach Backbone, Angular 1, and Angular 2. So we have to write new curriculum. Like, let's just write React curriculum. And then Cameron's like a developer's developer. Like, you give him a new shiny language, and he's like, yeah, let's do it, bro. Like
he comes back 48 hours looking really tired, just like, okay, I think I got a handle on it.
Right. And he's like up all night, just like, oh man, this is awesome. I love this. This is great. Right. So
1,000,000%.
He jumped in like both feet. He's just like super excited to work on something new and just, developer that wants to learn. Right. So that was easier. Wasn't as easy to convince the other folks on the team. And so I think that was a little tougher of a situation, because now just like, okay, what's going to happen here? What are we going to do? But I mean, it's software, right? You got to change. You got to go with the flow. And, is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll just keep jumping in your story.
Okay. So fast forward, like how far are we going to fast forward? I think we got to a good rhythm. I think we got to the point where I was like, Well, do we want to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room?
Well, now we can call it, I got Elon Musk, right? Can we call it that?
Yeah, you can call it Elon Musk.
I'll actually go through those details probably at some point in the future, but I need at least an hour. And it is a bummer that we were the first ones to go through it, because then they treated the next couple schools differently. So that was kind of a bummer.
Oh, yeah.
We just kind of like lost on like every single front. But you know, then it kind of led to what you're doing now.
We'll fast forward to the day where like the decision was made, like, that's it, we're closing. And like, we're done. And I was just like, no, bro, we can't be done. We can't do that. That's not happening. Right. And so that morning was like a Friday, and like, you were like, all right, we got to lay everybody off, including ourselves. And like, this is the plan that we're going to use to like wind everything down. And then I was like, damn it, bro, I got to go ride a double century tomorrow. Like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I still got to like go ride 200 miles on my bike. And it was actually kind of good, because it gave me like a release of I'd been training, right? And it gave me a release of a lot of energy, and gave me like 18 hours of like meditation to come up with a game plan. Because up until that point, like, I had no plan whatsoever. Like, I had zero. I was just like, every day, what do we need to do to prevent what was about to happen? And my brain had not even spent like one brain cell thinking about what's going to happen after we pull the trigger. So Saturday morning, wherever the heck I was, I don't know, it was like somewhere in Northern California or something, right? And I'm on my bike out there at like 4 a.m., riding my bike, and I start thinking about like, okay, how could I leverage what I think is available to me to like maybe do something, and how can I make all the pieces work? And so at some point I had figured out, and I don't know if we talked about it already, if we had already thought about it, but I figured out that there may possibly be an exemption in the law. And I wasn't sure yet, but I was just like, I think there's an exemption. I think there's a way that I could avoid initially having to go through some of the process and some of the steps. So it's like, let's start with like that being the case. Can I build a product around that price point and like squeeze it under the exemption? So I spent the whole day trying to ride and figure that whole, like, how would I make it work? And came up with a plan for San Diego Code School to launch it as pretty much like a remote program, and get a license to use the content that I had written for Origin. So that would be kind of like part of making it happen. I'd have to actually have some content to teach, because I wasn't in the position to be able to like spend the next few months rewriting content. And then pretty much just like make an offer to an existing team member or team members from Origin to say, hey, if you want to start this new thing, this is what I'm planning to do. And I was able to convince one. I asked a couple others, and then we started. We were just like, we're just going to do an online program. This is how it's going to be. We said we're going to charge basically $2,500, because that's what the state would allow us to charge without having to deal with any of the licensing stuff. And then we were going to basically say, you get 50 hours of like my time over the course of like 16 weeks to go through the curriculum, and then do some like activities throughout the week. Like, come over to my house, and in my home office, we'll mob program together, and I'll do some coaching. And that was pretty much the package. It was like 50 hours, 16 weeks worth of curriculum, remote. And you get to spend some time like one-on-one with a senior engineer, like a couple times a week. And so I talked to some folks, like my parents were just like, that sounds like a terrible idea, inviting strangers into your house. Like, you should not do that. You should just get a job. And I'm just like, no, like, I just spent the last like almost 3 years of my life trying to like build something and learned all of this like stuff. There's no way I'm going to let that go to waste. Like, I wrote all this curriculum. There's no way I'm going to just like give it up.
Especially on the student psychological side, I felt like we had learned, or at least it felt like we had learned 90 to 95% of all there was to know psychologically and dealing with students and what needed to happen for learning. So it felt to me, even at the time, like, oh man, I have to use all that knowledge, because it was so painful to obtain. And I feel like not very many people know this. So
yeah, I felt the same. I felt like we were so close to just like getting into that like safe zone where it's like, okay, we no longer have to worry about the state. I was like, but I can solve that last problem. I can like fix the state thing, and then just start rebuilding and like just build it back up to whatever it was before. And that was my goal. My goal was not to create a $2,500 product and stay there indefinitely. It was just to buy enough runway to like get up some steam to be able to get through the government process and do it without breaking any of the rules. So like from day one, I was like, I am going to figure out a way to do this by following all of their rules, despite the fact that they all make 0 sense. And so I was just like, I'm going to start showing up.
Go?
Oh, it's terrible. It was like the most painful experience of my life. And so far, they have not forced us to close. They have forced us to pivot.
So we're learning.
So we're getting better. But I mean, honestly, if you look at it like there's God's plan and like where we are today, I think if we had not had some of the pressure, if we didn't have our little Corona vacation to run right now, a little Corona vacation, then we wouldn't be where I think we're headed right now, which is a good place, right? And so I think it all works out in the end. It's just like a roller coaster of like all of these ups and downs, and getting to this point took a tremendous amount of like work and pain, but we're so close. And I know we felt like that so many times, but like we're so close.
I just like that you said it'll always work out. So I at least rubbed off on you in some way, shape, or form. I don't include the addendum about when it doesn't work out, but but that's okay. I don't want to pick on California too bad. Let me think of where I want to start. I think for me, the most relevant thing seems to be starting when I had been in finance for like 10 years and had all of the Epic game developers come in with their fat checks. They're like $200,000, somewhere in that range. And we're just like, hey, can you manage this for me? And they were like, oh, this is just my signing bonus. And I was like, what do you guys do? And they were all game developers at Epic Games at the time. So I was like, man, I need to get into this. I mean, I know more now, but even still, I would still get into game development over what I was probably doing at the time. So saw how much money they were making. That was simply the only motivation. So then I started going to tech meetups, tech meetups has kind of been a common theme that have paid off throughout the years, apparently. So went to a tech meetup. Somebody was like, oh, if you have an idea, all you have to do is post Google AdWords, send it to a landing page, and people will sign up. It's really not that hard. So I was like, sweet. So I got home and didn't realize what Google AdWords were. So that was tough. It was like 2014. It wasn't really that even long ago, really. And so I just figured out what that was, set it up, went through company one, quit my corporate job. I'll circle back to that someday. But basically it was just like a marketplace for fitness centers, and learned a lot doing that, and learned enough to know that this is kind of what I want to do, was start companies. And then I went to a code school because I realized when you're starting a tech company and an app, like you need to learn how to code, or at least know enough to build a prototype and then be able to work with the developer. Otherwise, I had no idea what they were even working on, or like what the options were of how to build things. And so went to a code school, had a rough experience myself, and kind of thought I could do it better. And so that led to Origin and kind of the story that you went through with Origin. After Origin ended, we've honestly probably talked like once a week, probably gone no more than 2 weeks without touching base, because I feel like for the last, I guess it's been like a year and a half now, we've kind of tried to figure out how can we take what we've learned at Origin and turn it into a business. And what's interesting is I feel like we've kind of arrived at two different conclusions that kind of are in the same vein and solve the same problem, but neither of them are code school, which is also probably a interesting takeaway for anyone who is thinking about currently starting code school. So so for me, I'm currently working as a developer. I kind of self-taught myself going through the curriculum that you generated, as well as some supplemental stuff with some stuff App Academy has online, and went through the whole interview process. And that was probably the second worst experience of my life, behind going to code school. I actually found a recruiter that ended up being pretty awesome. But before that, it was so painful that the tough part for me was just finding companies and being able to find out anything about the company. Because I had a unique perspective because I was looking for a junior developer role. But if you were looking for like a senior engineering role, you'd be looking for completely different things. But in either scenario, it's really difficult to kind of find what it is that you're really looking for, or what the company has to offer and what the team that you would be on would have to offer. So the thing I'm working on will kind of go into that vein a little bit, and currently just learning Angular 1, which is the first thing we actually taught at Origin, so that's pretty funny. And a lot of Java, so definitely getting better at Java, and just implementing my first API at the job, so I am pretty stoked about that. But yeah, that's kind of from a high level my career arc, if you will, because I just know me well enough to know if I go into any of those individual stories, there's always something weird that happens in all of them, and that'll be like another 30 minutes. So I'm sure I can circle back to any of those in the future. And so it is really weird to look back on the Origin experience. I do wonder what would happen during the coronavirus thing had Origin still been around. I think any code school is really in a tough spot to be able to recruit schools. Do you have any insight? I'm curious because I haven't talked to any code school founders in probably at least 6 months.
I would have to say that they're trying to sort of like, pre-establish what the outcomes will be, and that they know it's going to be a rough quarter, maybe a rough half of the year, maybe a rough year. What we have found is that there's actually some unique opportunities right now in San Diego. And so we think we found some ways to get people employed and to help mitigate some of the like people lacking the ability to make a quick decision to hire and bring on people, as well as the fact that like a lot of shops may be downsizing some of their staff and like letting go of junior engineers, so like the last ones in basically. So we've got the Advancing San Diego initiative, so they're hiring a bunch of people for internships, and then we've got our apprenticeship program, and so we'll be hiring people. There's a summer program through UCSD, Pong. We've got Tech Hire. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for junior engineers in our current marketplace, but it's going to be painful until we get a handle on the health situation, because it's not driven by like outside factors, right? It's not the economy, it's the health crisis that's causing the economy to tank. So as soon as you fix that, then I think everything is going to kind of bounce back pretty quickly. But I see no economic indications that like we're doing the things that we need to. Like there's no testing, there's no like contact tracing. So it's like, yeah, we're not going to be back in person like anytime this year. So everybody just needs to calm down and like.
Well, I have no comment.
Getting better.
I have no comment on the coronavirus response, but because I'd rather talk about coding, frankly. But and I know more about it. So just to be clear, if it was me, I would do nothing other than sign up for a code school right now and learn full stack JavaScript as soon as possible, even now, or almost honestly, especially now, because by the time you learn, whether you go to a 3-month one or 9-month one or whatever you decide to do, by the time you're graduating, people are going to continue to like hiring is going to be insane, right? Like whether it's 9 or 18 months from now, I don't know when it is, but I know it's going to be somewhere in that time period. And so if you can learn those skills now, you'll be set by the time you actually know what you're doing. So, I mean, but that doesn't mean people are actually, signing up, but there would be very few situations in which I would advise somebody like, oh, maybe you should put it off a little longer, right? So. Oh
yeah, I mean we've had those folks that are just like, peace out, I'm gonna bail now. Like I think that this is a terrible time to learn because I think people are losing their jobs. I'm like, bro, you have no idea. Like you're so on the outside of the space. You should trust the people that are in the space to tell you like now's the time to like invest. You're not like, what else are you gonna do? Like like just while you're at home, learn as much as you can. Take advantage of the free resources, take advantage of the code schools, like figure out whatever you need to do to get better every single day so that as soon as everything lifts, you're in the best possible position to get a job, right? And like But the problem is people make a decision like that based largely on emotion and based largely on like, what do they have resources wise right now? And let's face it, if you're unemployed, then your crazy thoughts are flooding through your mind about how you're going to survive. And so you're not thinking pragmatically in many cases. And again, they're not like you and me that are just like set our minds to something and then like just totally engage in trying to solve problems. So that kind of mentality, like if anybody is out there that has that mentality, you're going to be super successful. So follow our advice, like dive in with both feet. If you're not sure, then I don't know, like it may not be a good time for you to like jump in both feet. You might want to like take some team treehouse and figure out if you really love it and then get a little bit more invested.
Also, we do know from experience the people who are stressed out about an exterior circumstance, and right, like we always said, you got to pay your bills. But the people that were like, oh, but I have to have like an extra spending money, so I just drive for Uber every night instead of code for like the 3 months that they set aside for it, was always just tough, because you're just like, dude, like, I mean, if you have to, you have to. But a lot of times those people that didn't have to, they were just super nervous or paranoid, or like, I didn't understand coding today, so I'm going to go drive for Uber all weekend and not get any of the project done. And you're just like, dude, you're right there. You're right there.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, 90% of it, we've said this before, like 90% of it is like, if we could just get Tony Robbins to come in class and just like get everybody pumped up and keep them focused on doing the right things, only 10% of it is like learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Everything else is just being in the right mentality, having growth mindset, putting the work in, right? The work is hard, but like it's doable. Like you just have to be motivated to like just keep grinding until you get to like, it will just suddenly work and it will suddenly click and things will just start like making sense. But a lot of people have no faith and confidence in that because everything up to that point in their life has been significantly easier or significantly clearer and easier for them to do. I like using the gym analogy. People go in with like big eyes, like, hey, I'm going to go into the gym in January. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to get fit this year. It's going to be incredible. And like they have the goal and they have some motivation. But then after a month of working out and beating themselves up, they're just like, but I don't look like Arnold Schwarzenegger yet, so this isn't working. And you're just like, bro, it took you like 30 years to get fat. Give yourself more than a month to like take some of the weight off, right? And coding is very similar. Like you've got to put a lot of work in before you start seeing any results at all. And people are just not patient enough with themselves. They have these unrealistic expectations that like, I'm just going to start like typing super fast and code's just going to be flowing on the screen. And it's like, nah, bro, like that doesn't happen that way, you know? So I think that
I'm still waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. I mean, in real talk, like I've said multiple times, you're going to be on the job for a couple of years before that imposter syndrome goes away. And you're in like, you don't have that feeling every time your boss walks by, like, oh dude, like he's definitely talking about me in the office right now. They're definitely going to fire me today because I'm like taking way too long to fix this problem. Like today's the day. Like they're going to figure out, I have no idea what I'm doing. And they're going to fire me.
The first 6 months of the job, you just feel like you're going to get fired every day.
Every day. You're just like, look, did you see that look he just gave me when he walked by? And like your boss is just like on his phone doing something else. And you're just like, no, bro, like he's talking to HR. He's about to fire me. Like I'm going to lose my job.
He's like, what is taking him so long? And then you ask him for help. And he's like, oh, for that ticket, all you had to do was copy and paste this variable over on this page. What have you been trying? And you're like, everything else, but not that.
And then you're just and then as a developer, you're just like, oh my God, he's so much smarter than me. Like, I'm never going to get there. And you're just like, bro, just like relax, just calm down.
Especially
and everybody around you.
Especially the first day of the job when you're setting everything up and you just have to ask questions constantly because you don't know what you're doing. And you're just like, you're not even close to being able to figure out how to configure your server. Like, so you're asking so many questions that you're like, these are such dumb questions. I'm so sorry. In hindsight, none of those are actually dumb questions. Those are all really hard questions.
Yeah.
It's so like it says I have a path error. So next I should do what?
And then there's a good chance, like, especially if you have a good sized team, that everybody's just like, bro, just calm down. Like we've all been there. Just like, put your seatbelt on, let's get going. And like, you're just like, no, like, sorry, bro, I got to ask you again. Like, I don't know this guy's name, but like, I need help. And you're just like, bro, calm down. It's okay. Like, we're not going to fire you today. Today you're going to be okay.
I know.